Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warned that any future US attack would be met with retaliation on American bases across the Middle East in his first public comment since the Iran-Israel ceasefire. He also dismissed US claims of success in damaging Iran's nuclear sites. Israel has halted aid to northern Gaza over alleged Hamas theft, which both Hamas and local clans deny. Meanwhile, Spain's Prime Minister has accused Israel of committing a genocide, and the US has approved $30 million in funding for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, according to media reports. Ukraine has launched a massive drone attack on Russia's Volgograd region, temporarily restricting traffic on a bridge over the Don River, according to local officials. Meanwhile, Russia claims its air defenses have destroyed 39 Ukrainian drones overnight. Apple has revised its App Store policies in the EU to align with a key antitrust ruling, according to media reports. India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh called for a permanent solution to the border dispute with China during talks on Qingdao on the sidelines of the SCO defense ministers' meet. He also held separate bilateral talks with Russia to discuss S-400 missile deliveries and upgrades to Su-30 MKI fighter jets. Syria is facing its worst drought in 60 years, putting over 16 million people at risk of food insecurity. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, farmers and officials warn that without urgent aid, Syria could face widespread hunger and economic collapse. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif discussed promoting a durable peace between Israel and Iran in a call, according to the US State Department. Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo are set to sign a peace deal in Washington today, a diplomatic breakthrough to end years of conflict in eastern DRC that has claimed thousands of lives, according to media reports. In the latest developments, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has shut down talk of renewed nuclear talks with the United States, calling it speculation that should not be taken seriously. He says no plan or agreement exists to restart talks after the 12-day war with Israel. Meanwhile, Iran has now made a law to suspend cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog. Araghchi confirmed the bill is binding and will change Tehran's relations with the IAEA going forward. Listen in to what the Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said.
توافقی الان برای شروع مجدد مذاکره صورت نگرفت. من به صراحت عرض میکنم نه قراری گذاشته شده، نه قولی گذاشته شده، نه اصلا صحبتی ما کردیم برای شروع مجدد مذاکره. ولی این که بین خودمون داریم بررسی میکنیم که مصلحت مردم ایران چه هست، اون یه بحث دیگری است. تا الان هیچ قراری، هیچ موضوعیتی برای مذاکره گذاشته، یعنی وجود نداره و قراری هم گذاشته.
Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei called the US strikes on nuclear sites exaggerated and claimed Iran won a victory over Israel. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country's military victory over Iran has opened the door to expanding regional peace deals. In a video statement, he called the 12-day war a great victory and said it now creates a chance to dramatically enlarge the peace accords. The remark comes as Israel seeks to build on the Abraham Accords amid ongoing talks with US officials and regional powers. Let's listen in to what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said.
במקורותינו כתוב, אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. אנחנו נלחמנו בעוז נגד איראן והשגנו ניצחון גדול. והניצחון הזה פותח הזדמנות להרחבה דרמטית של הסכמי השלום. אנחנו עובדים על כך במרץ, לצד שחרור חטופינו והכרעת החמאס, יש פה הזדמנות, חלון הזדמנויות שנפתח, ואסור להחמיץ אותו. אסור לבזבז אפילו יום אחד.
In a fresh development in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia has seized control of 2 more settlements in eastern Donetsk, even as Ukraine claims to have halted a Russian advance in the Sumy region on the same day. The Russian Defense Ministry says its forces captured the villages of Novoserhivska and Shevchenko in the last 24 hours. It adds that troops struck Ukrainian air defense radars, drone production sites, storage depots, and ammunition warehouses across 152 locations. Meanwhile, Ukrainian prisoners of war have returned home following a new swap deal with Russia. Relatives emotionally welcomed the freed soldiers, many of whom spent over 3 years in captivity, mostly after their capture during the 2022 defense of Mariupol. The latest exchange carried out under the Istanbul agreements included wounded troops, soldiers with serious health issues, and young defenders under the age of 25. Hundreds of families gathered near a local hospital hoping to see their loved ones or receive any information about missing service members. Despite ongoing hostilities, both sides have continued prisoner swaps following recent negotiations between delegations in Istanbul. Meanwhile, in Brussels, EU leaders have unanimously agreed to extend sanctions against Russia for another 6 months. The renewal dispels concern that Hungary, a close Moscow ally, might block the decision. The move keeps in place sweeping restrictions, including the freezing of over 200 billion euros in Russian central bank assets through early 2026. EU officials confirmed that they had prepared contingency plans to maintain pressure on the Kremlin if Budapest refused to cooperate. French President Emmanuel Macron and European Council President Antonio Costa have shared their views on the sanctions issue. Let's hear what they had to say.
Aujourd'hui, ce qui reste d'actualité, c'est la seule proposition concrète qui a été faite, celle d'un cessez-le-feu inconditionnel. Nous continuons par ailleurs de préparer des nouvelles sanctions en coordination avec les États-Unis d'Amérique, au cas où ceux-ci ne trouveraient pas une réponse positive.
At the same time, we are keeping up the pressure on Russia, and we have adopted 17 packages of sanctions. And the work to deliver a new one, powerful package, is well underway.
In a controversial move, the United States has approved $30 million in direct funding to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an Israeli-backed group overseeing aid in war-torn Gaza. Let's listen to what the spokesperson of the State Department has said.
So what I can say is we have approved funding for $30 million to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And we call on other countries to also support the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and its critical work. A track record of distributing over 46 million meals distributed to date, all while preventing Hamas looting, is absolutely incredible and should be commended and supported. From day one, we said we are open to creative solutions that securely provide aid to those in Gaza and protects Israel. This support is simply the latest iteration of President Trump's and Secretary Rubio's pursuit of peace in the region.
The State Department called the GHF's efforts incredible despite widespread criticism from the UN and major relief agencies, who refused to work with the group over neutrality concerns. Meanwhile, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez sparked a diplomatic row by calling the situation in Gaza a genocide, urging the EU to suspend its cooperation deal with Israel. This comes as Israeli forces reportedly killed 65 people in Gaza Thursday, with local health officials saying 550 civilians have died near aid centers since late May. The GHF denies that aid sites have been deadly violent, while humanitarian groups warn of famine-like conditions and accuse both Israel and the US of weaponizing food. Now we move on to US and EU trade deal. The EU has received a new trade proposal from Washington, according to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. She confirmed the document's arrival but didn't disclose what the U.S. is demanding. Let's listen in.
Briefed leaders on the current state of play in our trade talks with the United States. President Trump and I had a good discussion at the G7 summit in Canada. Back then, we agreed to speed up the work with a clear goal, an agreement before the 9th of July. Today, we received the latest US document for further negotiations. We are assessing it as we speak right now. So our message today is clear. We are ready for a deal. At the same time, we are preparing for the possibility that no satisfactory agreement is reached. This is why we consulted on a rebalancing list, and we will defend the European interest as needed. In short, all options remain on the table.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is urging Europe to strike a quick and simple deal with the United States, not a slow and complicated one. Here's what he has said.
Zusammen gesagt, lass uns jetzt bitte schnell zu einer Lösung kommen. Ich habe unter anderem auch auf einzelne Industrien hingewiesen, die wir in Deutschland haben, die chemische Industrie, die pharmazeutische Industrie, der Maschinenbau, Stahl, Aluminium, Automobilindustrie, die werden zurzeit alle mit so hohen Zöllen belastet, dass das die Unternehmen wirklich gefährdet und deswegen lieber jetzt schnell und einfach als langsam und hochkompliziert. Wir müssen jetzt schnell zu einem Ergebnis kommen. Und darüber sind wir uns auch alle einig gewesen, da gibt es überhaupt keinen Dissens.
The U.S. Trade Representative's office has yet to respond to the latest proposal, although the EU and U.S. have been in talks for weeks. The Trump administration has shifted its focus to the Iran nuclear issue and maintaining its trade truce with China. With a July 9 deadline set by President Trump fast approaching, the pressure is on, or the U.S. could double tariffs on EU imports from 10% to 20%. Now we have guests joining us for this discussion, Patikrit Payne, Strategic and International Affairs expert. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. The EU has received new U.S. proposal, and we will have a discussion on this. The EU has received a new trade proposal from Washington, according to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. She has confirmed the document's arrival but hasn't given any details about what the US is demanding. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is urging Europe to strike a quick and simple deal with the United States, not a slow and complicated one. Here's what he has said. The U.S. Trade Representatives
Zusammen gesagt, lass uns jetzt bitte schnell zu einer Lösung kommen. Ich habe unter anderem auch auf einzelne Industrien hingewiesen, die wir in Deutschland haben, die chemische Industrie, die pharmazeutische Industrie, der Maschinenbau, Stahl, Aluminium, Automobilindustrie, die werden zurzeit alle mit so hohen Zöllen belastet, dass das die Unternehmen wirklich gefährdet und deswegen lieber jetzt schnell und einfach als langsam und hochkompliziert. Wir müssen jetzt schnell zu einem Ergebnis kommen. Und darüber sind wir uns auch alle einig.
Then we are moving on to North America. President Donald Trump made a final push at the White House for Congress to approve his tax relief and spending package, dubbed the One Big Beautiful Bill. The legislation aims to extend Trump's expiring 2017 tax cuts, increase spending on border security and the military, and would add approximately $3 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade. Let's listen to what he has said.
We're going to do that in history. This would be, if the bill doesn't pass, there'll be a 68% tax increase. Think of that, 68%, which would be the largest in history by about 40 points. And we'll make the Trump tax cuts permanent, expand the child tax credit, and we will deliver no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors.
However, deep divisions within the Republican Party, particularly over proposed Medicaid cuts and the bill's cost, have stalled progress in both the House and Senate, with lawmakers struggling to reach consensus ahead of the July 4th deadline. During the event, Trump also criticized Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell for not lowering interest rates more aggressively amid easing inflation, reiterating his belief that the Fed should take stronger action to support the economy. Now we stay in North America. The U.S. Supreme Court is set for a blockbuster final day of its term, with 6 major rulings expected to drop today. At the top of the list, justices will rule on whether U.S. President Donald Trump can enforce his birthright citizenship policy, while legal challenges are still underway. If the court sides with Trump, it could make it tougher for lower courts to halt future presidential orders. Justices will also decide if health insurance plans must cover critical medications and services, including HIV prevention drugs and cholesterol treatments. In a separate case, the court will rule on whether the federal government can continue funding discounted phone and internet services through fees collected from couriers. Religious groups have also challenged LGBTQ+ storybooks in elementary classrooms, and today the court will decide if parents have the right to pull their kids out of those lessons. Another big ruling involves Louisiana's congressional map. The court's decision could shape the 2026 elections and determine how much states can rely on race when redrawing district lines. These final rulings follow a term that's already seen landmark decisions on gun rights, transgender youth treatments, affirmative action, Planned Parenthood funding in South Carolina, and disability rights for students and retirees. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio held a phone call with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif to discuss developments in the Middle East. Rubio reaffirmed the United States' stance that Iran must never be allowed to develop or acquire a nuclear weapon. Both leaders recognized the importance of coordinating efforts to maintain regional stability, particularly in light of recent escalations between Iran and Israel. The call highlighted mutual commitment to peace building in the region, with an emphasis on a durable solution to tensions involving Tehran. With diplomatic lines remaining active, Washington and Islamabad signal they're on the same page when it comes to containing nuclear risks and avoiding further conflict in the region. Now we move on to Africa. Kenya's government has blasted deadly protests as terrorism disguised as dissent, after violence swept across the country, leaving at least 16 dead and thousands of businesses in ruins. The massive rallies marked the anniversary of last year's anti-tax protests, but what began peacefully quickly turned violent. Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen, in a televised address, said the chaos wasn't a protest, calling it an attempted coup and blaming what he called criminal anarchists for looting, assaults, and widespread destruction. The United Nations has expressed deep concern over the violence. The United Nations Human Rights Office said it received reports of protesters and police officers being shot, urging restraint and reminding authorities that lethal force must only be used as a last resort. Now we move back to North America. In a major shift for U.S. vaccine policy, a new panel of experts appointed by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has recommended a new RSV shot for infants. The panel, replacing the entire previous advisory committee on immunization practices, voted 5-2 to recommend influenza, a recently approved RSV immunization from Merck. The shot, known generically as clesrovimab, is intended for infants under 8 months old entering their first RSV season, as long as they weren't already protected via maternal vaccination. Clinical trials showed the shot significantly reduced severe RSV infections and hospitalizations. The 2 no votes came from members with long anti-vaccine records, including MIT professor Recep Levi and a representative from the National Vaccine Information Center. Levy claimed the shot needed more review. The other member did not comment. Kennedy, who has spent years questioning vaccine safety, recently fired all 17 members of the original panel, citing conflicts of interests. This vote was seen as a test for his newly installed committee. Now we move on to our next news. Colombia's new justice minister announced that the country will suspend key extradition requests to the United States, a move that risks further straining already tense ties between Bogotá and Washington. Eduardo Montiligre said the leftist government prioritizes bringing dissident guerrilla leaders to the negotiating table rather than incarceration. Among those who may be spared extradition are Gabriel H. Yepes and Willington Hinao Gutierrez, leaders of prominent guerrilla factions warned by U.S. authorities for drug trafficking. This decision comes amid growing frustration in Washington over Colombia's shift towards total peace policy under President Gustavo Petro, which critics say has emboldened armed groups and led to a surge in cocaine production. Now we move to Europe. The UK government has officially scrapped a major green energy project that would have imported solar and wind power from Morocco. The ambitious plan aimed to deliver electricity via undersea cables across 4,000 kilometers, supplying power to an estimated 7 million homes. But in a statement Thursday, ministers said the project did not align with the UK's goal of building more homegrown energy and raised concerns about delivery security and operational risks. British company X-Links, which led the initiative, expressed disappointment, calling the decision surprising and short-sighted. The firm had projected a 9% drop in wholesale energy prices and 10% cut in emissions. The UK continues to invest heavily in domestic wind and nuclear power, with new commitments topping £30 billion as it works towards net zero targets by 2050. Now we move on to North America. New York City Mayor Eric Adams kicked off his re-election campaign, but this time as an independent. His announcement came just days after progressive candidate Zohran Mamdani stunned the Democratic primary field with a surprise victory. Adams, who first won City Hall as a Democrat in 2021, didn't mention Mamdani by his name at his City Hall event, but he took aim at some of the Democratic Socialist positions. His popularity has taken a hit after federal corruption charges, though the Justice Department dropped the case once President Donald Trump took office. Back in April, Adams said he'd skip the Democratic primary, where Mamdani and former Governor Andrew Cuomo were also in the race, and instead run as an independent. Since Mamdani's win, Adams has slammed the 33-year-old state assemblyman from Queens, calling him inexperienced and accusing him of making promises he can't deliver. Let's listen to what Mayor Adams has said.
I want to thank all of you. Look at this beautiful display of diversity that's here. Look at people from all corners of the city and different ethnicities and faiths and groups. Not people who read about me, but people that I have touched individually, that I stood in hospitals with, that I looked at their families and made their lives better. Look at the display that's here of different languages and different cultures. All of us wanting the same thing. I'm so proud to be here to say to the people of the city of New York, I am seeking re-election to be your mayor of the city.
Now we move on to Asia. Japan has executed the man known as the Twitter killer, a name that has stunned the country back in 2017. Takahiro Shiraishi was sentenced to death for murdering 9 people, most of them young women, he met on social media. He used Twitter to contact individuals struggling with suicidal thoughts, offering them help to die. Police discovered the crimes after finding dismembered body parts in his Tokyo area apartment. Shiraishi confessed to the killings later, contradicting his own defense team's claims that the victims had consented. His crimes led to a change in Twitter's policies on suicide-related content. Let's listen to what Japan's Justice Minister has said.
本件につきましては、裁判において十分な審理を経た上で死刑判決が確定をしたものであります。法務大臣として慎重な上にも慎重な検討を加えた上で死刑を執行した次第で、執行を命令した次第で。
Now we move on to US. In New York, Sean Diddy Combs' defense team is set to deliver closing arguments in a high-profile federal trial that could send the music mogul to prison for life. Prosecutors wrapped their case, accusing Combs of creating a climate of fear while leading a decades-long criminal enterprise. Assistant U.S. Attorney Christy Slavic told jurors that Combs used power, violence, and fear to coerce women, most notably Cassie Ventura and a witness known as Jane, into drug-fueled sex acts. Combs, who denies all charges, chose not to testify, and his attorneys insist the relationships were consensual. Jury deliberations could begin with Combs facing charges of racketeering, sex trafficking, and forced prostitution. These are crimes that carry a minimum sentence of 15 years and up to life in prison. Now we move on to our next story. It's a star-studded affair in Venice as Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and his fiancée Lauren Chances kick off their wedding celebrations. The luxurious festivities are being held at the historic cloister of Madonna del Orto, with a list of celebrities pouring into the city. Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner were among the earliest to arrive for the glamorous weekend. Kim Kardashian and Leonardo DiCaprio were seen leaving their hotels, while Oprah Winfrey and Orlando Bloom were spotted departing alongside Bezos and Sanchez. Usher also touched down in style, adding to the long list of stars joining the celebration. The City of Canals has turned into a red carpet runway, marking one of the most high-profile weddings of the year. And as Venice becomes the backdrop for this high-profile celebration, the Bezos-Sanchez wedding is shaping up to be a defining moment, blending global celebrity influence and spectacle in true Venetian style. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.